Update now on the unprecedented raid on President Trump's Mar-a-Lago home.
Taking a look, FBI agents executed a search warrant, which was reportedly tied to retrieving presidential documents for the National Archives, including classified materials allegedly taken from the White House, some of it kept at Mar-a-Lago. Again, that's the allegation. Newsmax chief White House correspondent James Rosen live from the White House North Lawn with more. Good morning.
Sean and Emma, good morning once again to you from the Senate Republican leadership. Something close to crickets on this story to date. Mitch McConnell, the Senate Minority Leader, not tweeting about it. John Thune of South Dakota, the #2 Republican in the Senate, not tweeting about it. From Senator John Cornyn, Republican of Texas, the #3 Republican in the upper chamber, we have only a retweeting of something posted earlier last night by Kevin McCarthy. We will come to that. Now, the FBI action has triggered a cascade of support for former President Trump among House Republicans and Republicans across the country. Mr. Trump was reportedly in New York, another of the jurisdictions where he's under investigation, when an estimated 30 FBI agents executed a search warrant signed by a federal magistrate judge in Florida at the Mar-a-Lago estate. The raid reportedly stemmed from a long-running investigation into the former president's alleged possession and mishandling of classified documents after leaving the White House. Mr. Trump has denied all wrongdoing. The National Archives is said to have retrieved 15 boxes of presidential materials from Mar-a-Lago back in January. These are dark times for our nation, the former president said in a lengthy statement yesterday. Nothing like this has ever happened to a president of the United States before. After working and cooperating with the relevant government agencies, this unannounced raid on my home was not necessary or appropriate. It is prosecutorial misconduct, Mr. Trump continued, the weaponization of the justice system, and an attack by radical left Democrats who desperately don't want me to run for president in 2024. They even broke into my safe, he continued. What is the difference between this and Watergate, where operatives broke into the Democrat National Committee? Here in reverse, Mr. Trump concluded, Democrats broke into the home of the 45th president of the United States. Congressman Gerald Nadler, Democrat of New York, chairman of the House Judiciary Committee, tweeted out the headline with his own commentary last night. One word, reading, "Good!" exclamation mark. Democratic Senator Sheldon Whitehouse of Rhode Island, a member of the Senate Judiciary Committee, tweeted, "Records violations seem small to justify such a raid. I'm waiting for more to develop. If the record violation amounted to obstruction, that may be the reason." And then we heard from House Minority Leader Kevin McCarthy, who tweeted, quote, "The Department of Justice has reached an intolerable state of weaponized politicization. When the Republicans take back the House," McCarthy promised, "we will conduct immediate oversight of this department. Attorney General Garland, preserve your documents and clear your calendar."
There's never been a country where people who take power, like becoming president, now use that power to persecute their past or future political opponents. We've never seen that until tonight, when the Justice Department under Joe Biden decided to raid, using 30 FBI agents, the Mar-a-Lago home of the former president, who might, in fact, be running against him in a couple of years. Well, this is what happens in places like Nicaragua.
The FBI and the Justice Department are not commenting on an open investigation following standard protocols. The White House has said that President Biden has always respected the independence of federal prosecutors, and undoubtedly we will hear that again when we have the White House press briefing at 2:40 p.m. Eastern Time here at the White House. Sean and Emma.
We'll look forward to that. Chief White House correspondent James Rosen joining us live. James, thank you. For reaction and analysis, we'll welcome in the host of Spicer & Company, Sean Spicer. Sean, good to see you. Thank you so much for getting up early with us this morning on National Report. If I could just get your historical background on this and just how unprecedented a move is for the FBI to raid the home of the former president of the United States.
Well, I think the word unprecedented has spanned from left to right, from the mainstream legacy media to you and everyone else who's commentated. That's the common word that's getting used, and it's rightly so. We've never seen something like this before, for someone to go into a home, to crack open a safe, and we're all speculating as to what is the reason, right? We assume it's because of these records. And the question is, are these just notes? Are they classified? Are they classified at a much higher level? But the FBI is going to have to explain a lot of this, because this isn't just a normal raid on a citizen. This is a former president that was in discussion with the National Records Administration about documents that were brought from his administration with him after he left. Remember, the president of the United States can declassify any document that he wants. So there's a big question as to why did it escalate to this level this quick? And that's what I think a lot of people from both sides of the spectrum are asking themselves.
Yeah, no doubt. Plenty of questions remain. Sean, what is the impact, though, of this raid on the former president and his future political ambitions?
It's a great question, Emma. I mean, I tweeted out earlier today, I think if there was any question in anybody's mind whether or not the president was going to declare a run for the presidency in 2024, the FBI made it certain yesterday. The president of the United States, no question about it, will make that run. The FBI sealed that yesterday. They might have well gone to Mar-a-Lago and made an announcement for him. This made it very clear in my mind that the president knows that his enemies are out to get him, that he has to return to office to get things right. So, again, there are a lot of speculation that they're trying to force his hand. My guess is that he may not make the announcement, but in his mind, that decision is no question about it made up.
He did release a video that many call a campaign-like video on Truth Social as of this morning. Again, if you wanted to see that, that's on there. I'm curious to know, too, with you working in the White House, how likely is it? Again, President Biden, the White House rather, spokesperson says that they had no idea, they were not made aware of this raid. How likely is it that the White House indeed was not aware of this raid?
You know, it's an interesting question, Sean. I think the White House is a very vague term. Was the White House counsel's office made aware? Was the White House counsel themselves made aware? I have a belief that, yes. Was Ron Klain the chief of staff? Maybe, probably. But was anyone beyond that? No. I mean, there are several instances that happened while I was there where very senior officials, whether it was the White House counsel or the White House chief of staff, were made aware. And after the fact, I was told that they had been made aware of an action that the Department of Justice was doing. They had been read in. They were told that they wanted to make sure that the White House was told, but that they couldn't say anything about it. So just because a bunch of low, mid-level staffers didn't get read into the situation doesn't mean that somebody was given a heads up. Now, again, there's a big difference between a heads up and permission. They're not asking the White House to say, are you okay with this? They're just telling them, we are executing this search warrant.
Indeed. There have been plenty of reactions pouring in this morning from Republican leaders, including the Florida governor, Ron DeSantis. He tweeted this out. The raid of Mar-a-Lago is another escalation in the weaponization of federal agencies against the regime's political opponents, while people like Hunter Biden get treated with kid gloves. Now the regime is getting another 87,000 IRS agents to wield against its adversaries, Banana Republic. Sean, this raid happened in Florida, in the governor's state. Does Ron DeSantis act in a certain way following it?
Well, Emma, he's limited by what he can do. Obviously, this is the Department of Justice on a federal level. But I think it was smart for three reasons. One, as you said, it's Florida. He's the governor of Florida, so he acted because it's his area. Two, I think it makes smart politics that he is basically saying to the base, hey, President Trump may be a political rival of mine at some point, but I stand with you all. I think this is wrong. And three, he stands to benefit if for some reason President Trump were not to run or were to pick a successor at some point. If you're the person that has stood the strongest next to Trump, you would be in line to be that successor. For those three reasons, I think what Ron DeSantis did last night by coming out very strong was smart politics on so many levels. And he made no bones about it where he came down on that. He came out early. James Rosen pointed out in his earlier piece, the top Senate leaders, both Thune, Cornyn, and McConnell, all being silent is so noticeable at a time when you have both DeSantis, Marco Rubio from Florida, Kevin McCarthy in the House, and so many other senior Republican leaders and activists calling out how wrong this was. To see the Senate leadership sit silently by, whether or not you agree with President Trump or not, to watch the Department of Justice execute a warrant like this and crack open a safe in the president's home is something that you would have expected them to at least come out in support of the president and a rule of law, et cetera. And it's noticeable.
Yeah, Kevin McCarthy again says, I've seen enough again, but in the House Minority Leader, nothing again there from major Senate players. We're going to talk to Senator Roger Marshall in just a bit. Before you go, I did want to touch on this. The primaries being held in 4 states. This is still happening as well. Connecticut, Minnesota, Vermont, Wisconsin. Also, there are Trump endorsements sprinkled in here as well. Sean, what are you watching for today in this? And we'll let you go.
2 big things tonight. One, in the Minnesota race, it's a special election. Former Congressman Jim Hagedorn, had passed away. This is a special election. I think the Republican is strongly favored to keep this seat. The margin of victory, I don't read too much into it, but it'll be interesting to see how much they do. And then that Wisconsin governor's race, Tim Michels versus the former Lieutenant Governor Rebecca Kleefisch. Kleefisch backed by former Vice President Mike Pence. Tim Michels, the construction worker outsider, backed by Trump. He had been there. We covered it live on Newsmax last Friday night for that rally. I think all things being equal, it's Tim Michels to lose. He was a little bit behind going into that. I think that rally and that attention definitely may have put him over the top. We'll see. But just the way that Kari Lake got put over the top by that Trump endorsement and that late push by Trump, I have a feeling that Tim Michels is going to be in the same position.
Yeah, and then really the question, how does the raid motivate possible voters? Do they end up headed to the polls today because they're inspired?
Fantastic question, Emma. I think there's no question about it that this definitely adds some fire to the base. And it's really interesting because for the last few weeks, Democrats on this abortion ruling have really felt fired up, especially after the vote in Kansas. Some of the political wins, quote unquote, that they've had in the House and the Senate. This today changes the game. I think you've really energized the Republican vote. The MAGA vote is gotten fired up in a way that the Democrats didn't see coming. They've jumped the shark by the Department of Justice move. And I think that the Democrats, any headwinds that they thought they had going into the last 90 days have just gotten wiped out.
All right, great stuff there. Sean Spicer taking the time joining us this morning. Sean, thank you so much.
By the way, we got Rudy Giuliani tonight at 5 o'clock on Spicer and Company. He's gonna break it all down for us.
J.P. Morgan's CEO is warning that an economic hurricane is coming. Are you preparing? If you don't do anything, your 401k could be a 201k, and that is not good. So call our trusted friends at Lear Capital. For 25 years, Lear has helped investors own gold to protect against market chaos. It's a good thing. They can help you too. Get your information and up to $15,000 in bonus IRA gold. Just call this number, 800-880-4300. That's 800-880-4300.